You're grinding every day. Long hours, no backup, no accountability. That ends now. The Empower Solopreneur Mastermind gives you one simple advantage, a weekly power session that turns isolation into domination. Every Friday morning on Zoom, you'll get real coaching and real feedback to make real moves. Join a group of driven professionals in a program designed for solopreneurs and people working at home. Stop getting stuck. Start scaling. Seats are limited. Lock in yours today at modernobserver.com/empower-mastermind.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with Jan Jeremias, and the two of us are having a interesting conversation. We just thought we'd start recording. And I don't know if we'll talk about what we were talking about before, but whenever we do talk about something, and we're recording for this podcast, we're kind of mindful of what might be going on in your lives. You're going to be listening to this sometime in the future, so I have to really listen carefully to see what vibes I'm picking up from you. But I think the main sense that both of us were just kind of diving into is there are certain times of the year where there's almost like this biorhythmic cycle or something going on where the sense of there's something wrong around here, gets to be real strong. And it's not necessarily something you can put your finger on. And, having an idea of what it might be might not be any good in terms of making it go away. But I really do think that I'm coming away with some thoughts, having several people going through.
Sorry, I don't understand.
You're not supposed to understand, Siri. She's not big enough, okay? She's still pretty young. So I think really what it comes down to is kind of adopting a new gear, or at least a stronger gear of being able to emphasize and, be a good listener. I mean, from my standpoint, how it seems to me, sometimes all I can do is just be a gentle shoulder to lean on, and not necessarily have any answers. Or maybe not even so much have any questions, but, kind of hang in there with people that are struggling a little bit until they can get to the point where they come up with whatever question seems to be appropriate for them. I don't know, Jen, what are you thinking?
Oh, I was thinking that. I think one of the first things is you have to be okay with not being okay.
Yeah.
And I was just on a meeting, and that's what I was talking about. I think that we have to realize that it's okay not to be okay. That there are people around, like yourself, like me, where people can not be okay in our presence.
Yeah.
And I think that, but one of the first people we have to actually allow ourselves not to be okay sometimes. And to not necessarily push it aside, ignore it, compartmentalize because we're all busy and we're like, okay, well, I don't have time to feel this at the moment. I don't have time to think this, to whatever. I've got to get this done, or I've got to be here, or whatever. And so I think allowing yourself the space to be able to not be okay. And if you break down and you cry, or if I was on a call yesterday with a friend of mine, and she's like, is it okay if I scream right now? I said, perfectly fine. Because you got to let it out. I mean, maybe you let it out in a different place or whatever. Like you stand on a mountain and you scream or whatever, but you got to be okay with not being okay sometimes.
Well, this probably won't surprise you, but back in the day when I had my first voicemail associated with my cell phone number. I never really offered people to do this for my answering machine because other people in the house listen to that, including my children and my mother-in-law and my wife. So, but I basically, my answering machine message went something like this: Hi, if you've reached this message, you're a special person and you have my personal cell phone number, which means one of several things. First, maybe you have a question you want to put to me and get an answer. Cool. You can leave a message about that. Second, you might be going through a little bit of distress in your life, and you may just need to scream or cry into the phone for a minute or two. Then that's fine too. I promise not to listen to it with any intent, and I promise to immediately delete the message afterwards, so knock yourself out after the beep.
I love it.
You'd be surprised. That was kind of like my, and I just want you to know my cell phone is always available. If you need someone to scream and release that in the middle of a parking lot or wherever you are, and you're getting ready to go into an important meeting and you just got to get something out in the moment. Now, there were people that actually took me up on that, which I was quite, rewarded when they did. It was like, hey, this actually is a valuable service to somebody, right?
I mean, I think absolutely. I don't think we give ourselves permission to do that kind of stuff, either because there are other people in the house or because we have this like idea of ourselves in our head where we're not supposed to do things like that, like culturally or gender wise, it's not appropriate. And then all of a sudden, like obviously, I'm not telling someone to go out and hurt somebody. Like that's
No,
not
no, no.
what I'm
They will
saying.
act on that. Yes, they will.
So, yeah, but it's like, do you allow yourself to be a human being, basically, at times? And sometimes, we need that. Sometimes we need to, okay, it's kind of, I feel like if we don't, what ends up happening is we reach a point and then we explode. And I don't mean explode in anger necessarily, like we break down hysterically or because the energy just builds up.
Right.
And it's kind of like that, that all of a sudden it's like that eruption of a spout, like that volcano erupts, whether it be emotionally or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what happens. I mean, I think you have a human heart, then, that feels that's what ends up happening.
Well, hanging around a lot of Brits, as I have over the last 30 years, they have several sayings which are rather telling for our culture. But one of them, along with keep a stiff upper lip, is that there are certain behaviors they will say, it's just not done. It's just not done. One doesn't do that. Okay. So if you think about it for a moment, it's culturally unacceptable for us to express our human vulnerabilities. It's ugly and kind of messy to watch in some cases. And then if you just felt better afterwards every time, it'd be like, cool, wouldn't it? I can do this. But sometimes there's no sense of relief. Sometimes you do what you do in order to try to get it out, but it won't leave. And that makes for a long season in many cases for people. And that's where having some technology to sort of deal with your state and deal with if it's a conversational issue that you're having, there is no solution in the physical world. And there's no explaining it away, especially if it's at the level of a belief. And there are some things that are just that strong, Jan, where it's unquestioned that this is how the world is. And so I can't fight it. I don't like it, but then resist it and not give in and all the rest of it. But I really think that the escape door is what you talked about. That decision to do something like forgive yourself in the moment, or just allow yourself to be human enough to say, this is my moment. In poker, we have this thing called, if you're if you've just gone all in and you happen to be really behind to the other opponent's cards, then you say one time, this is my one time, where the miracle, one outer or two outer comes on the river or the turn. I think we all feel that way. Like we're entitled to at least a shot every once in a while. Can I catch a break around here?
Yeah. Um, I think so. And I think, but I've been really focusing on that whole idea of allowing it, and not in a resignation kind of way, like I've resigned myself to it, but just letting it have its own space, so
Yeah.
to speak. And so, like, its own space, and, just saying, okay, I'm allowed to feel that way. Not that I don't get it done, and not that I don't accept what's actually happening, because it's actually a part of acceptance. But it's just not expecting myself not to feel it or not to have those thoughts. Um, and so I've been working personally really hard in that. It's and it's something that I could say for myself is quite new to um to almost give myself permission to be able to do that. Um, but I do think that sometimes, like you said, exploding or whatever, it's still there. I mean, the energy gets out, and I think you need that. And then maybe you get to a point afterwards where you've gotten rid of that energy, and it just creates a little bit of space, even if it hasn't gotten rid of it, for you to have a different thought, or for you to think about something that might help, as a next step. Like, what's the next step I could do? Now that vented basically, what could I do next?
Yeah.
And maybe that next is, okay, I can go out for a walk and get some fresh air. Okay, that's going to clear my head a little bit. I can talk to somebody. You know, and and then see, yesterday I'm on with a friend, that friend who was having an off day, but I had had an off day the day before. So we were commenting, since we were working together yesterday, that it was really good that we weren't both off on the same day. you know, be kind of like, there's that too. It's kind of like, maybe having a little bit of humor around it.
Yes.
Um, and just saying, okay, I'm here again, or okay, I screamed my guts out, or I cleaned the kitchen and that did nothing, except that now I have a clean kitchen. But I mean, it really didn't help.
Right. Now I
Yeah,
have a clean kitchen to feel lousy in. Yeah.
that's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, see, the other part of it that's kind of cool too is that when you have it on different days, then you can both agree that you're having an off day as opposed to having it on the same day where you both are now quite convinced that the world just sucks. And you're both very right about it, and you're both very, very affirmed in your decision that it sucks. I don't know. It all depends on what kind of life do you want to have. I mean, I think before anything, um, I think people who decide what their commitments look like, and we talk about values and all those sort of things. If I remember and I'm awake, I always have those, fundamental core things that my life is about and for, to go back and dwell on those for a minute or two and see if that helps. And Jan, it does a couple of things for me. One is that switching from whatever fear, greed, or envy I'm going through before that moment, um, I'm now thinking about something that's empowering to me, like thinking about my grandchildren and their future, and what my legacy is to them, and what kind of a world do I want to leave behind, that I have something to say about it. Not the world where I have nothing to say, because that's too big. The one where I can actually do some things and leave them with some wisdom that they can either accept or reject, or leave them with choices that they might not have otherwise. To me, I think that's a worthwhile thought to have, or worthwhile life raft, if you will. to kind of get off of a sinking boat that where there's no future. And having the time to really sit and put everything else on hold for a little while, it's sometimes we just say we're too busy to do that, but I don't think it's a luxury, Jan. I think it's part of an overall regimen for having a healthy mind and a healthy soul and a healthy body. Is that opportunity to resharpen the saw, to clean the glass on the windshield, so you're really looking at what's going on outside of it and not just a dirty windshield. I mean, those metaphors are they're really appropriate for somebody who's gone through a transformational exercise and they're now open, especially if they've gone through a long period of being closed. I've been through those experiences maybe 4 or 5 times in my life, where I went from being pretty sure that things were never going to turn out for me, and going through a transformational exercise that allowed me to take a completely different look at the world. And sometimes it could be after an abject failure. It could be a really huge letdown, like being fired from a job because they were laying off, a certain number of dollars, um, not because of any type of a performance issue. And to me, that never made any sense. It never made any sense that don't they always keep their best people? You know, and so when that happened to me, I was fairly young. I was probably 28 years old the first time I got laid off by anybody. And at that time, what my decision was? I'm not going to work for somebody else for too many more years. That's when I decided I was going to start my own company. So I set a goal of starting my own company by the time I was 40. And the 1980s were a very difficult time. So by the end of the 1980s, I was really tired of working for other people. I mean, life was good. I made a lot of money and all that sort of thing. And, I've always overindulged in a work schedule and spent more time doing that. And so when I started my own company, I was 35 and not 40. I took on um, a startup with a friend from high school where he was the one that had all the knowledge, and I had all of the business acumen, structural training, all of those sorts of things, to make that side of the business successful. But quite literally, we started a computer company, and I didn't even know what to do when the C prompt was blinking at me on an XC computer. I had no idea what to do with it. I was a Mac guy for 8 or 9 years. So all I'm trying to say is that each time I've started over fresh and put out a new garden, if you will, and all I did was at this point is just kind of clean up the space, get rid of the weeds, start planting the seeds, and then get to the business of starting to tend to and nurture those areas of my life that I wanted to see growth and flourish. Um, Personally, those are the best times for me. It's like when you said before, when you get to being so busy and so overwhelmed by events and people and promises, and there's just no time for things, and working 14, 16 hours a day on deadlines and whatever. I'm really not sure that that's the best model for human beings.
No, I mean, I would, absolutely agree. And I mean, I look at any transformation I had, and any transformation I had was always after, I don't want to even say some abject failure, was some sort of life changing event.
Right.
Um, that, where basically, it was kind of like the who I was dissolved, and I had to reinvent and rise up from what was left and rebuild. And um and in some ways, I heard this and it really made a lot of sense. I mean, At least it made a lot of sense to me, I should say. Let's say I became some, like, I took what, let's say I took parts of myself and I rebuilt who I was. And not saying that I would go back and I think I'm a better person for it. Absolutely. But there was always this tinge of, I guess maybe it's almost like a physical scar. There's almost always the tinge of having something that was either an inherent little bit of sadness. It's like when you lose someone and you rebuild yourself, your life afterwards. There's always this little element of sadness that I think is carried along in who you are.
Right.
And I think that that's what I've always felt. It's almost like I always say that, one of my, most life-changing events, and it's not like I could go back to the naivete of before that happened, like, cause I can't. I mean, I can't undo I can't it can't be undone.
Right.
And, and so but I do agree that usually it's come with some sort of event in my life that kind of, where I had to change, where things had to change. I think as human beings, we're not very we don't welcome change. We don't in general, most people don't like change. And so when we have to change, I think there's a lot of resistance and a lot of times we sit there and we're like, well, I really wish this wasn't happening at all. And so how much time do we spend there? And that's very long-winded. I just decided. But but that was one of the things that came to mind in what you were saying. And and I think those life events, even if they're not like you decided that um, you were gonna go and create your own company, and do that. And, I can think of situations or things that I did. It didn't matter that people told me I couldn't do them. It didn't matter to me that um it almost became this, I was gonna prove it to myself that I could do it.
Yes.
Or I was gonna go out into the world and say, okay, well, everyone else is like this. And I don't like, let's say I don't think people are, acknowledge each other or are kind enough. And I'm not saying I'm not social. So this is just everyday things. I don't think people are acknowledged. I don't think people are appreciated or feel they're appreciated. So I'm going to go out and let people know that I appreciate them. And so, so I think that it's kind of like, when you're around people like that or people who you don't feel do that for whatever reason. And I'm not being critical, like they might be having a hard time and a hard day or a hard time and they're not doing that. It just gives me much more of a sort of motivation to sit there and say, well, I'm going to be different. Not that I don't want to like, I want to go out and want to make a difference. And you talked about legacy. And I think my writing has always felt like that was my legacy, were what I wrote and the impact that the writing had, because that was going to last far beyond me and my physical presence right now.
Yeah. Yeah. We seem to be having that kind of a day where I have a thought and it turns into a run-on sentence for a while. But sometimes that's what a thought thread looks like, that there's one thing sort of leads to the next. And before you know it, in order to really kind of get that initial feeling expressed, takes a lot more words than you budgeted for. But I want to say that more than anything, I don't care how much you've learned. I don't care what your IQ is. These basic human being fundamental weaknesses and strengths they're so close to each other. What one day is a huge weakness for you, with a little bit of interest can become your superpower, and that's one of the things that I've learned. And as you were saying before, a lot of things in my life I didn't do because people told me I couldn't until I was 20. And then after that, something kind of hit me at one point. When somebody told me I couldn't, I think it's something inside of me answered back and said, "Well, let's just see about that." And you know what I did? When somebody told me that what I really wanted to do is not something that was possible for me because I didn't have a full college education, I didn't have this, I wasn't, whatever. Um, I would take people out to lunch. I mean, literally sometimes, but other times, we'd be working together and I just pick their brains. And I'd have them tell me why I couldn't do what I thought I wanted to do and give me the blueprint of the steps that I had to follow in order to accomplish, my major goal. And over and over and over, um, I used it for small things. I used it for big things. Um, I don't know. I think it just became not a magic formula as much as it was a tried and true Bill Correll method for if you really do want to do this thing, it means you have to learn a lot of things you know nothing about right now.
Mhm.
So get busy and do that. I'll give you a quick example. So back in the spring, when I took this latest this latest career change, uh, somebody was telling me about someone else who had done this extraordinary deal and accomplished all of these registered rep um, licenses, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, "Well, this just isn't possible." And I said, "Oh, really?" And I sat down, like, And well, then what do you do? And how many hours does that take? And then what do you do? You know? Well, not only I did it in 5 months, not a year. So I hadn't engaged that gear in a long time, Jan, because I hadn't had to. And I can't tell you what it feels like at where I am right now to know that that is still a valid way for me to approach long-term issues or long-term goals, long-term problems, if you will, which I don't usually refer to as problems. I refer to them my brother-in-law calls them challenges, but I call them performance opportunities. These are the things where uh, the hardest part is in the beginning, overcoming the abject failure and the complete misunderstanding or lack of understanding of what went wrong, and to do it again and to do it again. And, the scientific method, right? Each time, kind of measure what I did, how did it work? And in the beginning, I have neither the understanding nor the ability to step outside myself to objectively measure anything. But as time goes on, there's some things that are coming up as repetitive, and then checking in with other folks and asking their opinion. But I think the whole point is that the by adopting the um I think it's almost like being able to distance myself from my performance long enough to fail at it on purpose over and over again until I start to get some understanding. And it's only through the actual experience that you and I can understand anything. You can't get it from people telling you, you can't get it from reading. I don't know how you learn how to hit a home run if you don't swing a baseball bat at a ball. Or how you recreate a famous experiment in chemistry class in college. There are so many variables that are not in the book. The things that actually do happen in the physical world, that there's no, well, when this happens, do this. No, it just tells you what they did when it worked.
S- I mean, absolutely. I mean, having, you know, there are certain things that I think you only know by doing. And then and then even when you do it, like, even if you learn it, there are going to be things that you can't control along the way that happen. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I guess I have to figure this out. Or this is like, this happened today versus, because every day is different. This happened today where it didn't happen yesterday. And
Right.
it's, problem solving and keeping on, and using your brain, um, you know, depending on what it is. Um, every every single time you do it. Um, Partly because most of the time when when you're studying for something that's different, I think in some ways you come and you're different every day. But when you're working with people, when they come before you, you're not getting the same person that you got yesterday, even if it is the same person. They're
Yes.
not the same. And so it's like when I get a student in my class, I have the same students over and over again, but they're not the same
Right.
because they come to me and, different things hurt or different things, or clients that I'm working with, different things are going on for them and they're in a different space physically, emotionally, spiritually. So there's no, so that's why every class is different because there's no way I could create the same class over and over and over again.
Yes.
And one of the things you said that, and I think this has become very obvious to me of late, is sometimes things that we label as, let's say, something that we consider a negative about ourselves, really we begin to understand is one of our greatest gifts.
Yep.
I mean, I think that for years I grew up being told I was too sensitive. And now I think sensitivity is one of the things that makes me who I am. And so kind of interesting. And I'm on a call on Saturday with a woman who I met on LinkedIn, lovely woman. And we're talking about she's been going through a lot. And I was checking in or whatever. And she said, I just want to, know, like it means a lot to me that you like text, you'll send me a message every few days or every other day. She also had a recent loss in her family and, you chat and, and her partner was in a car accident or whatever. So we're chatting and she's like, it really means a lot. And I was thinking about it because to me, it seems so obvious. Like it doesn't seem like a big deal. It's just like what you do.
Right.
And then I'm talking to her. I said, but my mom was always like that. And my dad was always like that. Look, I have a close friend now whose her sister is sick. And I want to tell you, I told my mom, and every conversation I have with my mom, and I speak to my mom like once or twice a day, she says to me, how's so and so sister doing? Every conversation, you know? And for me, that's just in my head. Like somebody mentioned something to me and it'll be there. I'll sit there and I'll say, oh my gosh, that's right. So and so's sister was going to the doctor,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like those things just, I mean, it's a humanity thing to me. It's like we're all in this together kind of attitude.
Yeah. That's a kind of a neat way to relate to the world. And since you mentioned that, what I really have noticed over the last 40 years, personal personal wins that I can't share with other people, they're kind of empty. I mean, there are some really big things that I've accomplished as an adult on my own, so-called with nobody else involved. And that was kind of like, okay. But all of the really great things that I can think of, or the great experiences, had other really important people in my life there. When I jumped out of an airplane and went skydiving, it was with my then, 19-year-old daughter. And that was an amazing thing for us to still talk about all these years later. That was 25 years ago. Stood on top of a glacier field looking at this amazing Alaskan, mountain of continuous glaciers just going off into the distance, as far as you could see. And I was there, with my wife for our 20th anniversary. There are so many of those small things, big things, but I don't remember too many things that I think are really that terrific where I was just doing it on my own by myself and there was nobody else there to share. And I guess that's how I'm wired. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That at some point, accomplishing a goal or being told by somebody after the fact that I accomplished a goal. When I was 8 years old, in the same season as a pitcher, I pitched a shutout, a no hitter, and a perfect game. Okay, all three of those things as an 8 year old. I didn't know what that meant. I threw the ball, and people went and sat down. That's just all how I knew happened, right? I threw the ball, they took a swing at it, nothing happened, and they went and sat down. So I threw the ball again. And, and each time there were these accomplishments, we had to have adults tell us what happened because we just didn't know. We're just out playing baseball, having fun. And that's kind of like the same experience for me when something really big, you know, accomplished. Like for instance, when I hit a milestone for annual income, or I hit a milestone for personal net worth, or I hit a milestone for the number of people in my company that were making over $100,000 a year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I always set those goals. But if the people that I was involved with weren't also sharing that with me and working to cause it to happen, just wasn't the same kind of juice in it for me after it happened. It was like a tree falling in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it. I can't name it really much better than that. And I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it, but that comes up for me today in this conversation.
Well, I could see that. I could appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, I think each one of us is wired differently, you know.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so, and also I think that it depends on, I don't know. It's not like what you were told or maybe it is what you were told. And then all of a sudden, some of the accomplishments were much more um, about you, and you didn't really need to share them with anybody else.
Right.
I think about that when I was telling this story earlier, that when I applied to graduate school, I mean, I was married and I was going abroad. So my first thing my family said was maybe I wouldn't get into graduate school, 'cause they were kind of like not excited. The fact that I was married and going abroad, like that wasn't very accepted. So they were like, when I got in, they asked me if I asked permission from my husband whether he would let me go. And so I think when I graduated, it was much more about me than sharing it with anybody.
Right.
It was much more of my own experience and like, I mean, the fact that I mean, I still obviously felt very accomplished because, work had paid for it. I mean, I didn't, I mean, I had to pay my living expenses, but all my school expenses were paid by my employer at the time. And so that was a big deal for me. And so it was just so interesting because as you're talking, I'm like, I think that's like one experience I never really felt. I mean, I think that my family was very proud that I ended up graduating or whatever. But I think it was a little bit of like, well, they weren't very happy that I went in the first place, kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that each one of us has our own kind of motivation or feelings around something. Um, about what we've done and for whatever reason. And sometimes we do things for ourselves and sometimes we do it I mean, I think all my writing has been for myself, a lot of it. And then I think that other things I did, Yeah, a lot, because that was just basically, it was like a self-development tool for me. Like, I mean, or a self-exploration tool, writing for me, and has been for a long time. And
Sure.
then and then academically, like, my degrees were um in a way very, I grew up in a world where, you know, educate like women were supposed to stay home and get married. Have kids, so academia wasn't, necessarily, I mean, they value education big time, but not really, you know, not really
No,
stress.
I think your experience of the last 40 years is probably quite different from mine.
Mhm.
And neither of us will ever know what it's like to be the other.
Right,
Having,
absolutely.
having watched women going through similar things with you, some dealing with it very well, some not so well, some abjectly failing over and over and over again, and I mean, some completely thriving. I always wondered, why is it that not all women are taking this opportunity to achieve what so and so has achieved? And I don't know. Maybe you've had some of the same thoughts about your peers, both male and female. Like what makes them different? What was the trajectory of their life? What happened for them that either you escaped, that experience, or you missed out on it? Um, I've not spent a whole lot of time thinking about that, other than watching the women in my life um, go many different directions over the last 40 years. Some good, some not so good.
Yeah, I think for, you know, I think, in some ways I think about it because I think about the change in women and in the workforce. And, I came a little bit later, I mean, but not much later. I mean, after, you know, the women's movement really started and kind of took hold. But I think some of it came from, but I do think that, yeah, there are certain women, and some of it was culturally and religiously, like what was accepted and what was not accepted. And certain people didn't um, wanted to fit in and be like everybody else. And then there were those of us who that wasn't it wasn't our goal to
Yeah.
be like everybody else. Um, either because we had a passion or something that we really loved or excited us, and we were like, okay, well, that really excites me. I find that interesting. I want to explore that. And so that became just, some people thrive on that. It's just like sometimes, do you take the safe road and and go into, a field where you know it's going to pay well that you don't think lights you up?
Right.
Or do you go into something that really excites you and then say, okay, well, this really, really, like, I love learning about this. This really excites me. And do you pursue that?
Yeah. Then there's the road to maintaining, the road to not losing ground, if you will. Somebody that I really know and love and respect found himself continuously having to earn the next promotion and the next raise and all of those things until he got himself to a place where he was really, really uncomfortable. The job required of him, uh, probably with the amount of training that he had and the kind of headspace that he had, things that really were very difficult for him. So he was in charge of a lot of people's livelihoods. And if he had to lay off 300 or 400 people at a time, it really took a lot out of him. I mean, there were things about the job that he absolutely detested, but he didn't feel like he could do anything else. You know what I mean? He got himself into a situation making far too much money, having far too much prestige, having a lifestyle that requires it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I've had both of those kinds of experiences of having the freedom and then also being a slave to a really great outwardly looking lifestyle for a while. But working for people there was no integrity, these folks were not careful about their language and how little they thought of their coworkers and the folks that worked for them. And that was kind of soul stealing for me. And I had to get away from it, and I found a way to get myself fired and get a year's severance. So I was very proud of that exit. But the point was, I made a big life decision several times to do something different than what I was doing. A, because it wasn't working for me. B, because it wasn't working. Or C, because I saw another path that I thought would take me further and work better.
Mhm.
And sometimes it worked out.
No, I can, and I do. I think that there's, I mean, I was in a situation now. I've been, I'm in a different situation, and I've actually reflected back and said, should I had stayed where I was, and and not have done what I did, because it would have been a lot, like, some of what I'm going through now would not be happening. But on the other hand, I don't know that I would have helped as many people as I've helped. Yeah, I I wouldn't have, well, I shouldn't say definitely, but most likely I wouldn't have met a lot of the people that I've met.
Right.
Um, and so I started to think about that a lot. Like, it's like, as I've reflected over the past like 5, 6 months on what I consider success and what's not successful, and or how I label success in in myself. And I think to myself, like, my life would have, in some ways, would have been easier, but I don't know that I would have had the impact I've had either.
Yeah. No, I really I agree with you. I think knowing you the way that I do, you've had an impact on a large number of people in a very profound way. Um, and I'll say probably even a larger number of people you're not aware that you made an impact with. But at the same time, um, we all, over a lifetime, get to do that over and over and over again. And sometimes it's on purpose, sometimes it's not.
Absolutely. Very well said.
But the other thing that occurs to me while you and I are speaking, we belong to this group of animals that is blessed and cursed with the ability to think of things other than how they actually are.
Yeah.
I don't know that dogs go around wishing they had a different life
Yes.
or
Yes. Oh, but well, the girl I've been in touch lately as Tonka declines with the girl who fostered him over the past few month or so, and so yesterday we were messaging back and forth. We were talking about him and everything, and with everything. And she said, basically, she's like, that before you got him, like, he was unadoptable, like no one else. Basically, I got, you know, she had adopted out his siblings, had gotten adopted, and he was the only one left. And so we were chatting about that. And I think there is something, like, she's like, you gave him a light, like you gave, like, who knows? I mean, I think she would have kept him had I not taken him. But, it's just like this feeling of like, I don't think they go around debating how things, animals just live. Like they just do. Years ago, I worked with a dog that had become paralyzed. It was a multi-dog household, and he got sort of, it was a dachshund, a dapple-haired dachshund who was adorable, and he had gotten sort of like in the way when one of the dogs had a seizure, and he had gotten thrown and gotten a spinal injury. So after that, he had a lot of mobility issues. And watching him adapt was amazing. And training wise, it was like they put food around the room to kind of get him to move so that he would get to one area and then he would get to another area. Like, I mean, it was amazing to watch. And eventually, with all the holistic stuff and everything they did, he got a lot of his mobility back. Like, it was really amazing to watch. But one of the things animals do is they're like, okay, well, I have this now. This is the way life is. Okay. I just go. I figure out how to navigate. I can't see anymore. I learn where the furniture is. I mean, it's pretty amazing how almost cut and dry it is. It's like, okay, well, this is life now.
Yep.
Human beings, and then we create our own limitations, let alone the ones that are kind of like almost, but, and being totally transparent, I mean, I have this stuff I do, which I know is limiting and is still really hard to change.
Yeah. Yeah, darn those animals. I just can't picture one of them are going, well, this owner's okay. They'll do fine until my real owner comes along.
That's right. That's right. I said that, and their amazing ability to make us laugh. Like, he makes me laugh every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell
Did I
you
ever
what.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you if I ever told you about the spoon that he has. Did I ever tell you spoons? So when I feed Tonka, I leave the spoon in the bowl at the end because, and so he carries the spoons around the house, and he always has. Like, he takes it out of the bowl, and I find spoons in his bed. I've found spoons outside because he gets them out, and I don't even know how he's gotten them out. I'll go in the yard. I'll be like, what is that? Oh my gosh, that's a spoon. But to this day, I mean, he's done it for the last 14 years. Every time I feed him and he does it, it cracks me up. I'm like, okay, yeah, go get your spoon. And he goes.
What a great game for the two of you to play. You give him the spoon and then he says, I dare you to find it.
Right, exactly. I dare you to find it. So.
Gotta love it. Well, here we are. We're almost halfway between Thanksgiving and Christmas already, if you can imagine. Just too much, And we're staring right down the nose of Hanukkah coming up here on the 15th, right?
Yeah, next week.
Yeah. So I don't know what today's overall theme is, but I think the sense is that there's more than one way to deal with, feeling like, it's not okay to be not okay. That sense that you have to name that before you even can grab onto anything and start to look at it. But this time of year is just so triggering with so many micro remembrances and memories on TV, out in the street, where you drive up and down the road, and and all those things I didn't mention that are going to be there, songs and people, their voice and their accents and whatever. It's going to happen. And see if you can't find a couple of different ways to deal with it. Maybe not just one, but give it a shot, kind of playing with it for a minute, as opposed to just being in a funk. I mean, if you want to be in a funk, knock yourself out. But if you get tired of that, start thinking of what kind of how can I gamify this? How can I make it a little bit more like play? And try that. And if that doesn't work, try another model. Just try something else that allows you to get your leg up on a life raft and get you through this period of time where you're able to feel good about who you are, and you're able to feel good about what you do in the world and what you've accomplished. And just take a moment or two and just honor all of that, all the things that worked and all the things that didn't work. That's my
And
my advice for the next 2 to 3 weeks.
and I think, and then kind of look at what supports you, and actually look at what doesn't support you. Like years ago, I realized that getting on social media during the holidays did not support me.
Right.
That was not a good idea for me. And I took myself off. Like I was just like, this is not a good place for me to be at the moment. Not to say that I always have to be or whatever, but during this time of the year, it's not a good place to be. And so it was knowing that, and not in a bad way, but just saying that, you know, that's not, that's not who I am, and that's not what supports me at the moment. And then, like you said, figuring out what does,
Yeah.
and realizing that, being open enough, and I say open enough to be able to sit there and say, okay, well, that's not working for me today. Can I try something else?
Absolutely. That the nature of trying something else is being in action. It actually is doing something. And sometimes doing anything is preferable to being where you are, feeling the way that you feel. Doesn't invalidate the feelings, doesn't make them good or bad, but we are that lucky. We're not puppies, having to think about, well, now I'm hungry and I got to eat. Now I got to pee. Now I got to go outside and run around and chase a squirrel. We can actually say, what supports me? What makes me happy? I don't have to be happy, but what would make me happy? Just sometimes thinking about what you can do to make your lot a little bit more enjoyable might be a worthwhile episode or endeavor, if you will. So any other thoughts, Miss Jeremias?
No, not at all. I think I'm complete.
Yes, you are. I think with that said, every week we like to give you homework, and there's a couple of things, but the first one is, this time especially, if you have those down moments, there's other people in your life that are going through that too, more or less. Some have it much worse than you do. Some have it better. But do everybody a favor, including yourself. Reach out and let the people who you really love in your life know that you're there for them if something ever came up and they needed you. And if they got one phone call left to give, you ought to be that person that receives that phone call. If for no other reason that you can cheer everything that they're doing and give them a rah, but at the same point, you might be able to get them to laugh. So with all of that said, today especially, I love you all, and I'm really glad you're out there. And I wish you as wonderful and carefree a holiday season as possible. And Jan Jeremias, I appreciate you to the moon and back.
Oh, back at you, Bill.
Yeah. We are lighting the candle, a world that works, ladies and gentlemen, and do go out and live your best life, and then come back and tell us all about it, please. Bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Exvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.